Hi, my name is Dr. Ian Moore. I am a veterinary pathologist and an infectious disease researcher at the National Institutes of Health. Back in March of 2020, my laboratory, which I head called the Infectious Disease Pathogenesis Section, was asked to be a part of a team that was going to take on the challenge of trying to create an mRNA vaccine to battle the current global pandemic that we have right now. If you fast forward 10 months later, 11 months later, now we are in the situation where we have two vaccines that are both mRNA technology that have emergency use authorization from the FDA. So over the last, I would say last 10 months or so, I've had a lot of conversations, a lot of communication with people across the country, but in particular from my small town. I grew up in Alabama. I went to Tuskegee, as you can see. And there were lots of questions, not only just about is the vaccine safe, but a lot of people had a very fundamental question. How does the vaccine work? And this is something that I think over the last months and even weeks leading up to mass release of the vaccine, I think it's something that's been slightly overlooked. And I wanted to take some time to try to explain how the vaccine works. And in particular, I wanted to do something more visual. I've heard a lot of people explain, I've heard a lot of people describe, experts on TV, but I wanted to stop and just take a second to do something more visual. I'm a visual learner. If I see something, I get it and I understand it. I've done this for a few other people, and the minute I finished the presentation, they had a much different feeling about the vaccine, were much more open to the vaccine because they understood what they were getting and potentially what was going to happen after they got this vaccine. The safety part of it, that's not to be concerned about. My job as the veterinary pathologist, and in this particular case for the mRNA vaccine from NIH, was the preclinical safety and efficacy studies. So what that means is we take this vaccine and we test it in animal models. And if there was anything that was not safe and if it was not effective at that level, it would never make it to human trials, which is your phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. In phase 3 clinical trials, which is what you probably have heard about, the vaccine was tested in a group of about 30,000 people. 15,000 received the placebo or like saline injection, and then 15,000 received the vaccine. This vaccine was found to be 94.5% protective, which is an astounding number if you are familiar with vaccines and their efficacy percentages. So I would like to reassure you that there are many, many layers of protection between you getting a vaccine and between a vaccine being created. So you have 4 or 5 steps. The other thing I want to stress is that some people have concerns about how fast this vaccine was made. The vaccine was made fast because in a traditional setting, when you design a vaccine, there are many, many steps. And then in between those steps, there's a lot of money that needs to be generated, and there's a lot of time that has to be taken to not only generate the money, but also to look at various ways to get to the next step. In this case, the government just said, here's the money, you and your team go for it, design it, and then all the pressure was off. If you can imagine you go and move into a neighborhood and you have a plot of land and you are tasked with the responsibility of buying all the materials, building the house on your own, and I'm talking about just you, with a hammer, and you go for it. How many years do you think it would take you to build that house, to get everything completely right so that you could live in it, if you had to buy everything yourself and build everything yourself? It takes a much longer time. But if you imagine your next door neighbors said, hey, you know what? We really want you to come here. So we're going to pay for all the materials of your house. That sounds like a good deal. Then let's say that all the neighbors in the neighborhood say, well, we're actually going to come out and actually help you build this house. So a house that now would probably take, if you're building it by yourself, probably 5 years to build, now goes up in probably 2 months because you don't have to pay for it. And you have lots of hands that are on board ready to help because they don't have anything else to do because it's a pandemic. So I just wanted to illustrate those key points to you because lots of people have questions about those. But what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to take you through a scenario of a virus particle infecting your healthy lung cells and show you what happens, but then show you what happens if you can get a vaccine. And I'm not an advocate for just the Moderna mRNA vaccine or the Pfizer mRNA vaccine. I'm an advocate for you getting vaccinated, period, because it's the difference between you protecting yourself and you going outside in a rainstorm, no jacket, no umbrella, and expecting to not get wet. That's not gonna happen. So with that being said, I'm gonna try to, hopefully after this video, you can understand a bit more and maybe feel a bit more comfortable about the vaccine process, but in particular, these mRNA vaccines. So if you can see here, this is our virus particle. The virus particle is covered by spike proteins. You probably have heard this many, many times on the news and seen it in papers and books. The spike protein, these are the spikes on the cell. Imagine those spike proteins as a bunch of keys sticking off of this virus particle. These keys look for a lock. The lock is on your cell. So the lock is the receptor. So here, I'm gonna show you, I have an example. This is a healthy lung cell. The darker blue dot here, this is the nucleus. This is all the cytoplasm. And these are the receptors. So now you have a situation where a virus particle is floating in the air, makes its way into your nose, down your trachea, and then it finds a lung cell. If it locks and docks on that lung cell, that receptor, the key and lock are now engaged, what happens to your door when you put your key in it and you turn it? You can now go into the house. So now the virus has gone into the cell, but now what happens when the virus goes into the cell? It takes over your cell. It's essentially like somebody taking a factory hostage, but the factory still works. And so now what the virus does, it says, hey, I need you to make more of me so that I can propagate and go out and infect other cells. So now let me illustrate that. Now you have this. You have a cell that was before healthy and happy, and now you have more viruses inside of it because what happens is the virus said, hey, I need you to go ahead and make more of me. The virus made more of itself, and now these cells, if you see the virus particles, they're going towards the edge, they're going to just release. And then when they release, they go out and they repeat the process over and over again. They have spikes, they have new keys. Your cells still have locks. So now these new spikes are going to go find new cells, and the process continues to grow and grow and grow. And exponentially, you have virus replication, and then you have cell damage. And if you have cell damage in your lungs, sometimes you have fluid accumulation. Fluid accumulation is equivalent to pneumonia. Pneumonia is what ends up having the ability of, if it's really severe, some of these people have issues where they end up getting on ventilators. And then ultimately, we know what some of those outcomes turn into. So I don't want to belabor that point, but I definitely want you to see and know how the virus particle interacts with your cell, because we've heard about spike protein. Spike protein. Why is spike protein important? Spike protein is the key. Your cells have receptors, which are locks. That's the way that it gets inside your cell. Keep that in mind. So now, what happens when you get your vaccine? Now, mRNA vaccine is different from traditional vaccines. Traditional vaccines usually have some virus in it. You take a virus particle in a traditional vaccine and you either chemically treat it or you heat it. You have to do something to render it inactive or to weaken it so that the body can recognize it, but the body is not going to get infected by it because it's a virus particle that's going out. It still looks like a virus particle, but it's weak and it can't do its job. mRNA technology is very different. What it does, this looks familiar. This is the spike protein. So if you're a baker, imagine if you had a recipe. Your grandmother has a great recipe for a cake. She gives you that recipe. You write the recipe down. You go home and you mix all the ingredients together. And what do you put batter into? You put batter into a oven. And on the other side, coming out, when you open the door of the oven, comes out a cake. So mRNA is very similar to that process. You have a spike protein. This is the spike protein that's a copy of what was on this virus particle. So now we know the genetic sequence of what it takes to make just the spike protein, nothing else. If we can make just the spike protein, which would be on these viruses if they come around you, we are giving your body the ability to recognize the one major factor, the key, before it ever can dock and connect and meet the lock and go into your cell. So if we give your body the heads up on your keys, on the keys of the virus, then you put yourself in a very good position to fight off a virus infection. But let me illustrate that in a different way. Here, I have a muscle cell. Everything's inverted in the image, so I have to look at it a little differently. Now, let's imagine you get a shot in your shoulder, like I did. Get a shot in your shoulder. The shot injects mRNA. Now, mRNA is the recipe or the sequence of just the spike protein. Once injected, the spike protein recipe goes into this green structure here. It's called a ribosome. The ribosome is out in the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is not the nucleus, and we're going to come back to that point. So genetic sequence for the spike protein goes into this green oven, the ribosome. The ribosome reads the recipe and says, I'm going to bake it for you. And then out pops on the other side these spike proteins. These spike proteins are the same ones that would be on the virus if you come into contact with it. Now, this is a very important point. These spike proteins, as they're made in this muscle cell in your shoulder when you got your shot, they make their way to the surface of the muscle cell. As they're displayed on the muscle cell is like, hey, I need somebody to come and look at these because I don't think they're from here, but I just want somebody to come and check it out. So you have cells in your body called antigen presenting cells. Antigen presenting cell comes along, boop, 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 and he picks up a spike protein. The antigen presenting cell is kind of a policeman. He kind of patrols, makes sure everything's okay. But what happens is he notices that this guy is probably not from here. Remember, the spike protein was produced by a muscle cell, but it is a sequence of something that is not normally in your body. So now the spike protein is inside of this antigen presenting cell. Antigen presenting cells look kind of like an octopus because they have lots of tentacles because they grab and they pick up stuff. So what it does is it picks up this spike protein that's newly made from the vaccine, and it's going to grind it and chop it up, and it's going to take little bitty pieces of it, if you can see here, the little red dots, little bitty pieces of it, and display it on its surface because it's wanting to let your body know, hey, I got a message here, and I want everybody to see it, and I think it's probably somebody that's not from my neighborhood. So I just want to let you guys know, if you see this guy coming around with the red dots and with the red hats, don't play around with him. So now what the antigen presenting cell does, it says, let's go to a lymph node. Now it's really important because these are all things that, if you think about it, these are all things that you feel as you're responding to an infection. Your lymph nodes swell, but why do they swell? The antigen presenting cell goes to the lymph node and it talks to T lymphocytes or T cells and B cells. And it tells them, say, hey, look, guys, I want you to recognize these red dots here and this spike protein. This is little pieces of him. I don't think this is the guy that we want hanging out in the neighborhood. So if you see him, you need to let somebody know, and we need to try to get rid of him. So in particular, the B cell. The B cells are the ones that produce antibodies. So the B cell is kind of like the guy who takes it a little bit too far, well, but in a good way. Takes it too far and he gets really, really excited. And he's like, you know what? If that guy comes around here, let me handle it. I got it. And I remember him. Give me that. I'm going to remember it. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. So now, remember, the antigen presenting cell goes to the lymph node, lets the T cells and B cells know that this guy with little pieces should not be in the neighborhood. Let's say that situation is after your second shot of the mRNA vaccine. 2 weeks passed. So now you have a really, really robust immune response, really strong immune response. That immune response is based on antibody generation. And who does the antibodies? The B cell, the guy who's really excited and says, let me handle it if this guy comes around. Let's say we have a scenario where you've been vaccinated, you're protected now. You've been vaccinated, but how does your body protect you? Virus particle floating in the air, makes its way into your nose, down your trachea, into your body. Remember the lung cells, nice, happy, healthy lung cell with the locks on the surface. So remember that. But now you have a extra weapon. Let's say that these silver beads, if you can see them, are antibodies. These antibodies are circulating in response to the virus now coming into your body. The virus comes into your body and the B cell's like, oh, wait. I recognize that guy. I recognize him. I recognize those spike proteins. I think I need to take care of this. Your B cell then releases its antibodies, and your antibodies start circulating in your body, circulating in your blood. And so this guy is circulating and trying to find its way to your lock. It wants to take one of these keys and put it on your lock. But what happens? Now you have antibodies circulating. But look what happens. Antibodies are circulating, the virus is there. Look at that. These spike proteins, or the keys that they need to get into your cell, have now become all covered and blocked by antibodies. Now, if you can imagine, what happens if you try to, as a virus covered with antibodies tries to make connection with your lock? Look, antibodies get in the way. They block it. So now this virus particle is just like, it's frustrated. It can't make contact with your cell. It's just hanging out. But then it has all these sticky things all over it. Those sticky things have two purposes. As we mentioned, the antibodies, they block the keys. But in addition, these are like flags for your body. So this virus particle, if you've ever driven down an interstate and you see a car that's been parked on the side of the road for, you go to work and you've been going to work for a week and you see the same car. Eventually you come back by and that car has a yellow or an orange sticker on the window. Now that car has been flagged for removal. So now a towing company will come and take it away. So imagine our friend, the antigen presenting cell, or his cousins, his very close cousins, macrophages. They come in and they say, hey, you have all kinds of yellow stickers on you. They engulf them, take them away, remove them. So what I tried to do there is I tried to illustrate how you can protect yourself if you get vaccinated. There are going to be some people who see this video and they're going to, maybe laugh at the analogies that I used. But the serious point is that not getting vaccinated is, nobody can make you get vaccinated, but I want to make sure that when it comes to you getting vaccinated, you have a clear understanding of how the process works, because we have two vaccines. We have two vaccines to use. We have two mRNA vaccines that are currently out with emergency use approval for the FDA. Those vaccines were not done in an unsafe way. They are completely safe, extremely effective, way more effective than probably some of our even more traditional, commonly used vaccines. But what I want you to do is I want you to take into consideration that you have opportunity to protect yourself. You have an opportunity to avoid infection, avoid unnecessary illnesses. Hi, thank you for watching this video. I hope it was informative. I hope it made you understand, at least to a certain degree, the vaccine process. And I want to make sure that I drive home the point that this pandemic is a very real situation. And now, fortunately, some 11 months later, we have at least two tools that we can use to fight this pandemic, and a tool that you can use to protect yourself. Once again, I want to, make the point that I'm not promoting one vaccine over the other. True enough, I work with the Moderna vaccine, and I think it's an amazing vaccine, but the Pfizer vaccine is equally effective on paper. So what I would tell anyone is that if you can get either of these vaccines, you need to jump at the opportunity to take it, because as we see, there are sometimes issues with rollout, sometimes issues with supply. But the main point is that I want people to feel comfortable with the vaccine. And in particular, in communities of color, there's a distrust. I went to Tuskegee. I understand the history of some of the distrust that exists, but this is not Tuskegee, and this is not the 1930s. We have people that look like myself at the top of the chain, and in particular, I'm sure you heard the name Kissimmee Corbett. She's one of the lead scientists on this development process. So those things, while they were a ugly scar on the history of the public health service in this country, those things are not the challenges that we face right now. The biggest challenge is actually people getting vaccinated, protecting themselves, and putting themselves in a situation to be here for many, many years to come. There, at the time of this video being made, I think there were 480,000 people that had currently died from this virus, and there were over 27 million people in the U.S. that have been affected. Back when I first started, back in early March, maybe even April, had conversations with people, and some of the comments were, well, I don't know anybody who has it. Fast forward 10 months, those conversations have changed to, I know somebody else who died and somebody else who died. So it's very likely that it goes from you not knowing somebody who was sick to now you probably know somebody directly, maybe even a loved one, that has perished. Now, back earlier this year, there was no vaccine available. So the only thing you could depend on was trying to mask up and trying to stay away from situations where that might get you infected. But now you have a choice. If you were coming to my house and you left and you're getting ready to go home, I would probably say, hey, give me a call when you get home. The reason I do that is because there's so much that can happen between the time you get there and the time you leave. If it was raining outside, I would ask you, do you want to see my umbrella? Because I want you to not get wet on your way to your car. This vaccine process is no different. But a pandemic is a serious situation. A pandemic is something that is meant to be, meant to slow you down. And so, but if we have a tool or have tools, plural, to fight this pandemic, then we should use them. So I just want people, this is essentially a plea from me as somebody who worked directly with the vaccine process, somebody who is a minority, Black man. I completely understand the reservations that people have, but this is not that situation. So if you have the opportunity to get the vaccine, I've taken both doses of the vaccine. So I'm not just a person telling you to go do it and I haven't done it myself. I've taken the vaccine. Are you going to have a side effect? Potentially. Not everybody does. But side effects, the mild side effects that are commonly associated with these vaccines are nothing to be scared of. Protect yourself, or you can put yourself at risk and gamble on not getting infected as the virus continues to spread. So with that being said, I'm going to end this video, but I definitely want to reiterate, if you can get a vaccine, please get one. Moderna, Pfizer, and hopefully Johnson & Johnson will get approved. That's still undetermined at the time of this video. But please consider getting a vaccination. Don't be scared. Don't be scared of the side effects. Side effects are normal. Side effects are your body's responding to the vaccine. So if you do feel chills, if you do feel sore, if you do have a fever, it's the much more minimized version of you getting infected with the virus. The same flu-like symptoms that you might have if you ever got sick with the flu or you got sick with coronavirus. The very early stages of it, you start having those types of feelings. That's your body responding to it. So side effects aren't necessarily bad. Mild side effects just mean that you're responding. And some people don't have any at all. So if you can, get vaccinated. I hope this message resonates with somebody. And if you can, take care and stay safe.